If you could separate the want from kind of the income statement, right? So don't attach it to a metric on the income statement, whether it's revenue, gross profit, net profit, EBITDA, whatever that might be, especially if you're not all that attached to money. Something that you can feel in like everyday life, right? So if you really want something, you probably wake up and still desire it the next day, right? And if it's near and dear, it's probably something that's really kind of bugging you. It's really kind of, eating away at you.
All right. Welcome back to another episode of the BMK Vision Podcast. We're going to have a good call today. Unfortunately, Gary Ryan's not going to be with us today.
Yeah, it's a bummer.
I know it is a bummer. It's always fun to have him. He's working a really cool project somewhere in Montana. We'll see how that turns out. Gary, I'm glad we're having this call because I've had a very similar this episode here today. I've had a very similar conversation with a couple of clients recently, and I'm really interested in your take and Ryan's take as well. This notion of, like, we spoke last time about getting stuck and where people get stuck and where they get stuck, and we probably touched on a little bit of like, what do you want? Like really identifying what you want. And I think we probably even said something about how hard it is for people to name what they want. But I had a conversation very recently, and I had a different conversation yesterday, but the conversation of where are you going with the business and where are you trying to go, and how uncomfortable people get with the topic of naming a dollar amount. We probably covered a little bit about that, but just what's your take on that?
Yeah, I got a couple different perspectives on that. I think the personality trait that makes a good technician and probably someone that elevates themselves to an MSP owner, um, cares about money is about as little as a human could. I
Yeah.
think, it's like, it's a necessary evil, but it's not really the thing that drives them. Just anecdotally, I came up with this thesis about halfway into my journey of owning a MSP business, and I found that, you know, at a certain level of that business, which was mainly just technicians, as hires, the idea behind what they wanted, was it money or time? The answer typically became time. And this showed up in various ways of, you know, n- I couldn't pay them enough overtime for them to say yes every time. They would just want to go home. They would want to have their weekends. And I think that became a very normal kind of business or personality trait that I found from engineers and technicians is they just wanted their own personal time over the money. It wasn't as important. And so to extrapolate that to the MSP owner that might have that same personality type, um, not really defining money as their kind of end state, might be true. So I think that may be part of that issue. Um,
I think that's right. I think there's a pathology to that almost where it's, and I think I could easily be hurt as saying Josh thinks money's everything. No, I think it's almost lazy to kind of say I don't care about money or I value time over money. I think that's like the start of a conversation, not the end of a conversation. So when I get, 2 hours, 5 hours with a client and they say, the money isn't that big of a deal to me. And then there's a period at the end of that sentence. I think I know I get really frustrated because to me, it's very natural to say, that's awesome. What will money do for your security, for your ability to do other things you can do for other people, things you can do for your team? It's almost like a virtue signal when I hear that. And again, I know I probably sound like a boomer or some uber capitalist there, but I don't know. Am I completely off base? What do you think?
and I think, yeah, the culture, especially today, kind of doesn't promote. capitalism as a good thing, right? So it's like, you definitely hear the message of, greedy corporations and those kind of things, which, there's definitely a lot of those out there. So I'm not saying that there's not. But yeah, you want to, be more virtuous, right? You want to say, or you probably believe the things that say that money isn't really kind of the ends to it. And I think you touched on it. It's like to go a couple order of effects deeper and say, well, okay, maybe you don't want to be Scrooge McDuck, right? Swimming in money, sitting in your castle. Yeah, that's cool. But what do you want? And then what could that money help you accomplish that? And it doesn't need to be a selfish kind of endeavor. Maybe you want to pay your people more,
Mhm.
right? Well, you can only do that if you make more money.
Right.
Maybe you want to send your kids to college, you know? You're only going to do
Right.
that if you can make more money. Um, so that question of what do you want is so critical, and it's our, from Bering McKinley perspective, it's our job to get them out of that. Oh, I want my company to be $10 million or whatever the thing is, right? Like, that's the easy way, and it doesn't seem to align based on what you're saying. Um, so it's our job to kind of tease that out of them and say, okay, yeah, 10 million bucks, exit, those kind of things, cool. But what else? What is really kind of driving that $10 million mark, or or name the value, revenue, whatever it is.
Mhm. Yeah, that's exactly right, and, I'm just as you were talking, I was reminded of, this moment that I was with a client like 15 years ago, and he really nice guy and cool guy and all the things, but he had an interesting chip on his shoulder. And I think when you work with a consultant, you feel like you know the person, but it's not until the 50th hour that you're working with somebody that they'll really kind of let their guard down. So I probably had the conversation a little too early, and there was just whatever defense mechanisms he was showing, and uh, he came to the money talk, and no, we're fine, we're good, and I said, okay, so cool, retirement, you're set. I know you're like 41 years old. Retirement set. You got all the money you're gonna need for retirement. A house is paid for. Kids, college is paid for. Everything. And he goes, for the most part, I think we're good. And I was like, cool, dude. Let's call your wife because she's your bookkeeper. So, and she was expecting a call. This is call right now. And I said, "Hey, wife, client, your husband just said these things are all true." And she's like, "No, they're not. Not even close." And that was it, like the unlock for that conversation, because that alignment between the other important person in that owner's life. I usually find spouses are pretty well aligned with each other, but on that topic of money, it's kind of interesting to kind of find that gap. And sometimes maybe that's all that owner needs is have your partner on that conversation. What do we want? What do we want for our children? What do we want for whatever? I think it's just really hard for people to go there alone. And, you, me, Ryan, having that conversation. Some people will be, very open to having the conversation. Others, it might take a psychologist to have the conversation.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of psychology around just money in general, right? Like, I don't know that I've met many business owners in the MSP space that came from a ton of money.
Right.
It just seems more blue collar, kind of, grit and grind. And I've met a lot of successful ones, certainly, and have made it, possible to kind of do all the things that they can. But yeah, I think, I don't think it's unique to the MSP space to have, some insecurities around, money and bank accounts and what money even is and how to get it. It's like,
All right.
it's a big issue. And aligning with the spouse, I mean, I think there's plenty of data out there that says the majority of the problems in marriage or relationships is financial driven. So
Yeah, absolutely. And not just not having money, other areas around money, I'm sure. So it's been fun this last, really year where I've kind of returned to becoming, less tactical conversations with our clients and more strategic conversations with the clients. And it felt very awkward in the beginning to kind of say, hey, let's zoom out from getting techs to enter their timesheets, which is really important, but let's kind of figure out the why behind it. And I always, feel silly that I think it was Daniel Pink or Pinkman or whoever wrote that book, getting to your why or why matters. And it's like it's so obvious, and I think I lost my way with that for a while, but, uh, you even think about getting texts in their time, it's like, "Well, why do you care, owner? Well, why do you care about that report? Well, why do you care about that profitability? Why?" And eventually, they have to say, "Because we wanna be more profitable or we wanna grow." Okay, why? As you've kind of really shown me, it's just why do you want a bigger house? Why do you want a safer neighborhood? Why do you want to, have this money so you can do that? But it's been fun conversations with people, but it's been very, very challenging in a different way that I'm used to of having those conversations with folks.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was thinking about this earlier is like, what if, the company goal or kind of what the ownership or leadership wants, out of the company or for themselves. If we get stuck on this, valuation, which I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing to set a goal around that. I think that's one goal that's really good. But if you get stuck in you know, I want my business to be X dollars, and you don't actually believe it, because it's just not something you're attached to. I was thinking like, well, what is a sufficient answer to what do you want? And some ideas that kind of, brainstorming just kind of ideas around that is like, if you could separate the want from kind of the income statement, right? So don't attach it to a metric on the income statement, whether it's revenue, gross profit, net profit, EBITDA, whatever that might be. Especially if you're not all that attached to money. Um, Something that you can feel in like everyday life, right? So, if you really want something, you probably wake up and still desire it the next day, right? Um, and if it's near and dear, it's probably something that's really kind of bugging you. It's really kind of, eating away at you. And we've all felt this with material items. Like you keep on seeing that car that you want, or you drive by that house in that neighborhood that you really want. Um, so it should be something that's kind of eating away at you. And then it most likely forces some kind of strategic trade-off, right?
Mhm.
So it's like if it's really something you desire, um, you might find that you'd have to give up something that you're doing today in order to get it. Most solutions are
Right.
just trade-offs at the end of the day, right?
Right.
So when you can start to frame your mind around kind of those three things, maybe there's a few more out there, but you can really get to that why statement that you're asking yourself. And then from a strategy perspective, it all kind of branches off from there. Um, so that's what kind of think the trick is to kind of get out of the business and the income statement. Is this going to be something that affects me on a day to day basis? And what am I going to have to give up or start?
Okay. Let me okay. I hear the words coming out of your mouth, but I'm probably hearing it even more different in my head. So let me run this by you and tell you what you think. You'll tell me what you think. So I had a client in, and he's actually not the owner. He's like the director. The owners are really trying to get out of the business and just be owners, not operators. And it's really cool what they're doing. So it was challenging to have this conversation with this guy because 'cause I'm used to, something a little different, but, in that moment, I had to kinda treat him like an owner where it's like, "Well, you're working at the pleasure of these guys. They're not doing a phenomenal job of telling you what they want in terms of an outcome, so you kinda have to put yourself in there," and he has a little equity stake, so when we started playing with his equity stake, that helped drive kind of where we need the business to be in 5 years. And this will take a minute, by the way. So for him, he's in his mid 50s, and he has a really young child. He has like a 5-year-old, which is so cool. Uh, but as we started playing the "Why do you want that? Then what? Why do you want that? Then what?" game, it crescendoed at, uh, "I want to be done in 6 years, and I want to do nothing but hang out with my then 10, 11-year-old and coach soccer, all levels of soccer, And in order to do that, I would need this kind of payout for the company." So it was cool. Like, this is a really cool, open, awesome guy. And now that I heard what you just said, I'm wondering, in the Vision app, if we wrote company goal, if it was like, be able to coach soccer, because we kept referencing that all day long. We were tying it to tech center in their time, or pre-sales engineers doing something a little different. Like, am I hearing you say in that line in the Vision app, right? Be able to coach soccer starting in 2031 and not have to worry about money?
Yeah.
Or is that too literal?
It's not. I think, if you can get to that level, um, it makes all the sense in the world to make that your target. And we've kind of toyed around with this idea, that's why, like, we can hide the company goals from kind of the different teams inside the Vision app, just in case the owners want to put something very specific. Maybe they want to exit, or maybe they want something else that they want to keep kind of private. So there's a way to kind of toggle that on and off for certain sets of individuals. Um, so that's kind of built in a way. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, if that's truly, it's post business, right? Like, that's kind of the idea, is like, you want to get to that point where you envision yourself after the business, right?
Mhm.
And this isn't for everyone. Some people work till the day they die, and that's totally cool too. But you can hear the strategic trade-off mechanism kick in right when you say that, right? It's like, well, obviously your strategy in the trade-off there is like, exit maybe 100% or the majority from the business to be able to spend time with your child and sports and all that kind of stuff, which is totally awesome. But in order to get there, what do you have to do? Well, it's a lot of
Mhm.
business level stuff,
Mhm.
right? A lot of delegation, a lot of training, a lot of role um, changing. From a personal level, it's, balance sheet protection, it's, financial planning, it's, probably some kind of level of, you know, removing certain expenses from your lifestyle, right? So
Mhm.
there's a lot of trade-offs and strategy around all of that. Um, and so for this person that is not necessarily an owner, but more of an operator or part of the executive team, um, that his goal needs to align more with the company. So having his goal outside of the company, um, there's probably levels to that, right? Like, what is
Right.
what is the company goal? The company goal is probably him to exit the business.
Right.
And then
Right.
what do you do in order for that to happen? Now he knows personally what he wants to exit and why, and he should anchor in on that, vision board, whatever the
Yeah.
thing is, a picture of him and his son, whatever the thing is that he's allowed to anchor himself in at, because he knows what that means. But now that he's attached his true personal kind of interest to kind of what he wants from the business,
Mhm.
that's where the motivation and, the discipline will set in much easier.
Sure.
We'll be right back with more. But first, here's a quick message from Bering McKinley.
Most MSPs are constantly busy, chasing tickets, projects, and fires. But without structure, it's hard to know if the business is really improving. Vision from Bering McKinley is the system that helps you work on your business, not just in it. It connects leadership strategy with daily execution. Vision aligns people, process, and performance, creating clarity and rhythm from goals to results. And the Vision app brings that structure to life, helping you create policies, track goals, review KPIs, and collaborate with your BMK consultant all in one place. Behind it all, Jetson AI, your assistant inside Vision, helps you find answers, generate insights, and take action faster. With Vision, you gain visibility, accountability, and measurable growth. You're not guessing, you're improving. Vision, Jetson, and the Vision app, your path from strategy to results. Start transforming your business today.
All right, let's get back to the conversation.
Sure. Well, so, I consider you my supervisor or my mentor in so many ways around how we are making this awesome transition. We're focusing very strategically with our clients. And so you get to see my work product, when I work with a client and you're looking at, hey, what did that client and Josh come up with for the top level goal? And a lot of times it's, a valuation of X. And then the story is not told anywhere else in the notes or anything like that. So, you kind of reference the valuation, and I'm sure some of that is informed by the fact that you're seeing, dozens and dozens of clients, and that's the thing that's at the top. Do you consider that hey, that's where a majority of people will land, or do you consider that hey, I think they can go even further in naming the goal?
Yeah, I mean, I think they can go further. And like I said, if it's the larger the organization, the more principles or more people attached to that valuation and the reasons for their exit,
Mhm.
it could get trickier to do, right? So let's just say it's a $3 million MSP. He wants to exit at 5. He's got 25 employees and there's one owner and 5 executive staff. He could put something hyper personal in there as the company goal,
Right.
right? Much greater than the valuation. The valuation can fall to a milestone. That's
Mhm.
no problem. And then you could wrap strategy around like an initiatives around getting to that milestone. So it's just one level kind of up from what you would typically do by setting the company goal as the valuation. Um, so I don't think that's a problem. When it gets trickier is when there's many different personal reasons, and maybe they don't want to share. Maybe they don't want to be as open, or maybe they just don't want to have that around. It's too personal, right? So I think you can still anchor in on these goals. You can also put them as personal goals as well, right? So
Yeah.
you can kind of attach them. But I think the bigger picture is the idea around that, right? Like if we can, come up with, a company valuation and then, really press people that are in the room on why they agree with that company goal and what's going to motivate them and align with them. Because if they don't want to exit, but the owner does, they're going to have a different set of strategy around how they get to that valuation.
Mhm.
The owner may want to exit, but there's a reason why he wants to exit. And it's not always just about the money. So, certain things like time and control, right? So, like, he just wants more time, more control of his schedule, right? Get that with or without an exit, but, with an exit, you solidify that, right? Well, if he wants to do things like cut his hours to 30 hours a week versus 60 or whatever, um, now you're starting to wrap strategy around how you get there, right? And a company goal of evaluation will help, but it's not specific enough to really understand, well, how do I get to $10 million valuation or 15 or whatever? Like it doesn't really clearly state that, right? And it doesn't really clearly state why you need to do anything different. Maybe you need to make more revenue, but then what? And how do you do that? So when you get more clear with what you actually want, right? Yeah, I want 10 million, but I actually want to work 6 months out of the year. That's what I really want. And the 10 million will help me get that. But what else do I need to do to get to 6 months out of the year? I'm here every day, 60 hours a week.
So if we said, yeah, guy really wants to, work 6 months out of the year, and that's like really just we bought what he sold. He's that's what he wants. kind of thinking very mechanically in the right size organization with the right team. Could that be the goal of the company?
Yeah, I mean, I think so.
Yeah.
I don't think it matters
Yeah.
cosmetically. I think just knowing, and you could put it in the description or whatever, but like that's ultimately what you want to get to, because what happens is I want to work 6 months out of the year. What does this force? Right? It forces delegation, right? It forces leadership layers. You got to kind of make sure that there's someone that things go through.
Right.
And then it exposes like weak processes immediately, especially if the owner's involved in sales or vendor relationships or maybe purchasing, whatever they, kind of do but don't do in the business. Like
Uh-huh.
many owners, have this kind of pet project type of thing that they don't want to release. Well, when you stop showing up half the time, or quarter of the time, whatever the cadence that you're aiming for, you need to fix that before it becomes a major problem. And so it's much easier to get to those answers versus I just want to have a $10 million valuation, right? It's not specific enough to
Yeah.
really set strategy around. Now you can, and it'll take a little longer, and you'll probably come up with the reasons but it's very tactical thought process. Oh, okay. I need 10 million and every client's worth 100,000. So I need 10 of those to get to a million, and I need to sure, but what was all that for?
Right. Yeah. That really unlocks a couple thoughts for me. So when we say get a valuation of $7 million in 5 years, all right, cool, good clarity, outstanding. If if in if we parallel that with the guy who says in 5 years I want to be able to spend as much time as I want coaching soccer, one of them is fixed as a fact of the universe. I want to go coach soccer. The other one, if we say we want that valuation of X, it's like, well, 2 years from now, when you're nowhere close to it, if you're just like, oh, the market or this or that, we did this wrong, we're recalibrating. Well, maybe we could change that valuation to, $1 million less. The guy who said, I want to coach soccer, there's no moving that. Once they've anchored into that and they remember the next morning they said it, it's like, yeah, this is what I want. I don't think I'm making the greatest point here, but it for me, that makes a lot of sense. That's a non-negotiable. You want that or you don't. The valuation can be a moving target.
Yeah, moving the goalpost, right? It's like,
Yeah,
oh
right.
man, like look at we've figured all this stuff out, and like we got there in half the time we thought. Like, let's just go for more. And that's gonna happen, Like it really should happen, right? Like you should be setting these goals as SMART goals, right? Like they should be attainable and realistic, right? Relevant to kind of what you're talking about, but they should be attainable. When they're not, it's they're not really goals. They're just kind of hopes and dreams.
Right.
And everything gets wonky after you set those. So if you're being somewhat realistic in what your expectations are, and you really start to work on things, especially if you haven't been doing that yet,
Right.
you'll find, man, your business really goes quick. Time goes faster, growth goes faster. Um, and then you'll get to this kind of target that you thought was unachievable or, stretch goal, whatever it was, in the past. And you find like, oh, well, we can continue to do this. Like this is no problem. And that's totally cool. But when you counteract that with, yeah, but I also said I wanted to coach soccer.
Mhm.
Now you've kind of set a limit on kind of what you're willing to go through, Um, and boy, if you want to think about what's possible in time, it's like you'll never have more time with your kid playing soccer. Like that
That's
thing
right.
ends,
Right.
business can go forever,
So let's yeah, no doubt. Let's switch gears just a little bit on that kind of theme of getting stuck. Um different client conversation over the last week or so was what the impact on the team is when there is no target that they're shooting for. I had I had a great conversation. I'm trying to remember who it was with. It was around, oh yeah, oh, phenomenal company, awesome company. Uh, and I'm meeting the director of services, and nice guy, smart guy, all the things. And I was like, all right, so you're the director of services. That's outstanding. Instead of me talking to the CEO as much on this call, I'm going to talk to you a little more. And he's like, all right, cool. And I said, hey, how we doing from a service gross profit level? And they're kind of we talk to them 4 times a year. They're not, super engaged, but they're really cool and open to everything we're doing. And he I said, "So what how we doing on that service gross profit?" And he's like, "Nah, I don't really know, that's numbers aren't really my thing." And I'm like, "Okay, cool. But I thought I heard you mention earlier something about, you work on profitability." And he said, "No, I do. I work on our pricing and this and that." And I'm like, "All right, cool. But do you see some lack of congruency here with you don't know the outcome, but you work on this thing called profit?" And he didn't. He thought that felt kind of natural, and then the CEO kind of didn't need to, but kinda came to his defense and said, Yeah, I try not to burden these guys with that kinda stuff. It's just too much. They've got enough to worry about." And he's a really nice guy and well-intentioned, but I I'm glad I wasn't old Josh, because old Josh would have just lost his shit and yelled and, tried to make bombastic points. So I just kind of rolled with it. But point here is like, if there's no goal, anything this kid is doing is probably tactically sound, but you're not driving towards anything. Do you see a bigger problem with that scenario that I see with it? If you see it differently?
This is kind of the defining factor of like a early stage maturity MSP versus one that's maturing. The defining factor is lack of adhering to metrics. And I don't know why it takes so long for business owners to get there. I'm thinking back to, my journey, and, it's a good 5 to 10 years until I really started, looking at metrics in a way that wasn't just vanity stuff that, was tracking revenues and, net profit and, but really getting into kind of the levers that you need to pull, like you're saying, gross profit, and then assigning it to someone, and understanding like why you would do that. Um, but it probably has something similar to do with kind of like that, you know, husband and wife scenario that we talked about earlier. And maybe it's just like a lack of knowledge, like we're so ready to like teach someone how to like image a computer and like set up a new user and those kind of things. We have like real knowledge about it. Um, but when we don't have true kind of grasp of the financials and kind of how we integrate that into the operations, um, maybe we're feeling a little insecure about, doing that. And then obviously that shows up as, this incongruency that you're talking about, where it's like, yeah, I'm supposed to care about profit, but I don't actually care. I don't really know why I care. I don't really know the numbers.
So I think that kind of discomfort factor of, talking about money or talking about, what we really want to do, I think that's a big part of it. There is this other subset that really just, again, 10 years ago I'd be pissed, red in the face, mad, all the things. Now I'm just like, all right, cool, we just have to get past that somehow. But if I talk to 200, 300 brand new, faces to me that are MSPs a year, at least 20% of them say something like, we'll get around to the topic of entering time or ticket hygiene, and man, they just think I'm the dumbest person in the world. They're just like, "Oh, that's not us." I mean, they're sitting on a big pedestal. That's not us. That's not the culture we want. I'm like, "Really? Tell me more about that." I have to pretend it's the first fucking time I ever heard that in my life, but it's like, "Whoa, that's an interesting take. Tell me more about that." And it just kinda comes down to you are saying something that makes 0 sense, but you're saying 2 things that make a lot of sense. It's, "I want a great culture. I also have this problem," but their response to me saying, "Hey, I wonder if this time entry or ticket hygiene has anything to do with it," their rejection of that doesn't make sense. So it's like, "Great, you have a problem and you really want a great culture. You can have this other thing in between." So I think there's something there around just like this kind of culture fallacy of I can't have accountability or metrics and still have an awesome culture. So,
Yeah. And I think to the disservice of the, you know, economy at large, it's like the Silicon Valley kind of, ping pong table on every floor and, sleeping, pods that, you could use whenever you want, and unlimited PTO and all these things that came with the free money era of the 2010s, really kind of disrupted a lot of people's mindsets of what a business could be. Um, Now, on their own, all that's beautiful, but it costs money. And if you don't have money, then that's not really possible. So culture, leading with culture, doesn't necessarily mean lack of discipline. Um, and there's ways, there's different levers, right? Like you want to not track time and um, give everyone kind of, the luxury of kind of being, half utilized because it's too strenuous to their job and all that. That's great. You got to charge a lot more than you normally charge.
what's the
So you want to
trade-off?
fight the battle of protecting your, fun culture that doesn't have accountability around time entry and those kind of things. Well, go talk to your customers about how you're going to double their price, and now 50% utilization makes sense. And look, that is one way of doing it, and you may actually end up with better techs that are happier, that provide better service, and obviously charge the customer more, but because the techs are happier and more willing to, do the thing, and that may be the right formula for you. But you can't lose on multiple fronts in this kind of game of business. You can't not charge enough and give the techs everything that they want and don't require anything and have no accountability and then complain about your P&L. Like you can't, you know?
Right, right.
So, and I think this is just a mismatch of goals, right? I think a lot of times how that shows up is they've thought intentionally about one thing and not the other, right? So they said, okay, I want to build my company around a great culture. Okay, cool. And then we've done our core values and we've got our mission and vision statement. And we really know what we want to do. And here's how we hire people. And everyone loves to work here. And we pay people a lot and all that kind of stuff, but you forget to check the other side of the equation. And, then it's like, well, okay, how do I, how do I afford all that? Are we charging enough? How many clients are we onboarding a month or a year? How do we do sales? Right. So you've leaned heavily onto one side of the game, which is important, but you got to kind of align it with this other side. And this is what we call strategy. Right.
Right.
So,
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. That's I think that's thinking back to the service director who doesn't focus on profitability. Uh, you're spot on. If I go one level up, it's the CEO has a whole different side of the business that runs completely different. He has this MSP kind of snapped into it, and on the other business, he's got, lots of partners, and it kinda operates almost like a law firm, and it's like, "Oh, yeah, you don't have any need for clarity over there. That thing just prints money, and you guys have been doing it for 50 years, and who cares?" So his logic and his kind of rationale of how he got to where he is, it's like, it just probably needs a little more clarity over here on this other business that you have. It just doesn't operate the same. And if you're not used to having to run your primary business that way, then it feels very awkward to say, "Hey, director of services, here's your metrics that you need to achieve." So the goals are just not anywhere in the mix for them.
Yeah, I think that's another like kind of maturity stage of like, did you introduce a business line too early into kind of your maturity level? Does this actually align with what you're trying to do when you think about strategy in the overall enterprise? Like, is this even discussed? Right. Like it may just be like we don't think about that because it doesn't really matter. It's 10% of our, P&L.
Right.
It's not, we like the people there, but we're not really kind of paying attention to it like we do the other thing. So, yeah, that might be a tough one for us to help because, they
Yeah.
may just be that this is not what they're paying attention to. Um, and that's okay. I mean, not all business lines need to make money and make sense, but I think people will be surprised on if you put this same proportional effort into one part of the business, you might find that the other part could also succeed in the same way. Or you might find, hey, this actually doesn't make any sense. Like we don't
Right.
need to do that. Like this is actually distraction. And we've, you know, at Bering McKinley have found that out in the past year or so, that could be true. So
No doubt. Let's kind of I'm going to introduce kind of another tangential topic to this, and then we'll start winding down here. Got in a conversation around uh I think, yeah, they were the owner, and he's kind of at the end of his rope. Not like, like, oh, I'm shutting my doors. He's just kind of, he's like, I'm mad all the time, and I don't like being mad. Like, so there's some self awareness there, and he's like, if I hear another employee tell me they don't know what's going on, or we have poor communication, I'm gonna lose it. And I'm like, all right, well, let's, to use a lame phrase, let's unpack that a little bit. And he's kind of saying that, I have a company meeting every month, and I'm always emailing everybody on the team and all that. And as I just kind of heard him, I was just kind of running the voices of all the other clients we've worked with and even our own company. And it's like, what are they really saying? Okay, if are they saying I didn't know that we hired a new, you know, office manager? Okay, okay. Or are you saying you didn't know that we just got another client? Okay, that sounds very anecdotal and specific. Or are they really saying I don't know where we're going as a company? And it comes out in these moments of these small things, but what they're of just this moment they didn't know was happening. Do you understand what I'm saying here?
I do. I think that most companies talk um, to each other in inopportune times. There's a lot of meetings and a lot of cadence around those meetings that can be healthy, but they don't actually allow for communication to be clearly understood. So it's a lot of talking at, it's a lot of dictating. People are in meetings, they don't know why. But from an ownership level, you think we're talking all the time, right? We're talking about strategy, we're talking about client issues, we're talking about what we're going to get accomplished. Um, but I think a certain type of person needs a lot more than that. Um, we've had employees like that.
Sure.
Um, One thing that I did that I don't, I know a lot of businesses do, but I don't know if enough do effectively is, we got really strong with our daily huddles.
Mm,
Um, and if you don't do those, it just sounds like a nuisance. What are you talking about? Like, when would we get together and like we have stuff going on and people are busy and they're driving to work and they're, you know, but what we did with the daily huddle is we did it in fourths. So it was like, what's the most important thing that you're doing today?
mm,
If you can't express that, especially as a technician, you are not clear on what your job is, right?
mm.
Like any technician should go onto their service board, sort by priority and time, and be able to see what their number one priority is. And that's what you bring into the huddle. And, you can extrapolate from there. And then we talked about, what was something that good that happened from a client in the past day or so. So it gets us starting to talk about our clients more than kind of internally or, in a positive way. With MSPs, that's really important to make sure that, clients are, treated as, valuable assets to the company, and recognizing that. And then we talked about, what was something cool that someone else did.
Mm.
What did someone save me from a fire? Someone take over my job when I had to leave to do something else? Was the owner super generous, giving me some extra time off? And then the last thing was just like, what are you doing this weekend or tonight, or what's something outside of work? So you're forced into this kind of like, quartile of like, things that are important, but not overly meeting, kind of focused, and everyone gets to talk, and it takes about 15 to 20 minutes. And, you do it with your smaller team. So it's like, no more than like 8 to 9, maybe 10 people. But you get to talk to people. Like, this is a way to learn about people, to kind of get recognition, and to get to talk a little bit more directly versus this agenda style meeting format. And, oh, we forgot to announce that we hired a new receptionist in that meeting and those kind of things. Right.
Right.
So this was like one little hack that we added, and, no matter what, we were all there. We would have it in a conference room, so we'd all stand up, and, we would look each other in the eyes, and, that became like a very deep rooted value that the company had, and really moved us forward, because we were always talking. We were, it was never like, oh, I haven't even talked to that guy for 6 days in a row. I think this is what employees lack inherently, is just kind of that community factor.
Mm.
And where the ownership misses it is they think that emails, text messages, Teams chats, meetings are a replacement for that.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
that's my opinion on why business owners miss the point and get to that point of, and I've heard you say that personally. So
Yeah.
I understand, pretty intimately what that kind of could look like.
Sure, sure. Yeah, there's definitely that interpersonal communication that's not, structured around some agenda of some other meeting that they're sitting in. So I think I love that. I think another kind of angle on that frustration from the owner that kind of shared, how fed up he was, I think was so is what they might really be saying is, again, we don't know where we're going. We don't know if we're winning or if we're losing. We don't know what the path looks like even for the next, 90 days, let alone the next 5 years. And in his case, that seemed to mean something to him, where, we probably should have talked about huddles and getting the team, in a more casual but structured, communication, environment. I think also that idea of, dude, they might just be sensing your energy that you don't know where you're going. And, if you just kind of think of that word lead, it's like, well, where are you leading us? Leading typically indicates point A to point B. And right now, maybe they just feel like they're, turning circles in the sky.
Yeah, I think look, it can't hurt, right? It can't hurt to set up some structure, some strategy, some goals around kind of what you want the company to do, and then getting your team involved, right? Like, if you feel like that's going to impede your ability to kind of move forward, I just think we're talking a different thing.
Mhm.
Um, Now, how you do that is kind of where it all kind of matters. And, especially in the world of IT and tickets and service, it's like, man, that light is like never lit. You can never see the end of the tunnel. It's just forever going to have another, 20 tickets on the board. And
Yeah.
that can get fairly annoying, if not, aggravating for a lot of people. And so if they don't understand why they're doing that past the point of like just making the client happy, um, yeah, certainly they should say, what the hell are we doing?
Right.
You
Right.
know, and if your answer is like, just do the tickets, like, okay, be prepared to hire new technicians every 3 to 4 months, because like that's about as long as they'll stay if they don't understand. Um, yeah, I'm super excited when we meet people that kind of have that issue come up where it's like, okay, we don't really have any strategy, we don't really have any company goals, we haven't really talked about anything with the team too in depth, because it's like low hanging fruit. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can kind of just implement,
That's right.
and get going on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that why do people get stuck? Why do companies get stuck? I think one answer we got in the last 5 seconds is, are the employees asking, what the hell are we even doing? Is probably somewhere on the answer list. But Gary, thanks for coming on today. It's always fun. And everyone else, thanks for joining us with this conversation. Make some comments below. You know, we love reading them. We love responding to them. Let us know what you think. And otherwise, we'll catch you next time. Bye.